Ladies and gentlemen, in the quiet spaces of our minds, there exists a constant hum, a never-ending conversation between the thoughts that we call our own and a deeper, subtler voice that seems to come from somewhere beyond us. This distinction, the one between the fleeting chatter of our thoughts and the still, resonating voice of the divine. It is a question that touches the very essence of who we are and what we are meant to become. Clarity, in its most profound sense, is the absence of confusion. It is the feeling of seeing things as they truly are, without distortion, without the clouding influence of emotion, desire, or personal bias. When we are caught in the whirlpool of our own thoughts, clarity can feel elusive. Thoughts swirl around like a turbulent river, disjointed and conflicting. One thought contradicts another, leading to a sense of disorientation and frustration. We find ourselves lost in the maze of possibilities, trying to find a thread of understanding amidst the noise. God's voice, however, carries with it a kind of clarity that is unmistakable. It doesn't come as a forceful answer to every question, nor does it explain everything immediately. Instead, it is a gentle illumination, a quiet truth that seems to settle deep within us. It is like the sun breaking through clouds after a storm. Suddenly, what was once unclear becomes self-evident. There is no need for analysis or mental gymnastics. The truth that God speaks aligns with the very core of our being. And in that alignment, we recognize the clarity as something innate, something that resonates with us on a level deeper than the mind. This clarity does not require us to force it into our understanding. It arrives naturally, and in its presence, our own thoughts become secondary. The mind that is filled with a flood of ideas, distractions, and desires becomes quiet in the face of divine clarity. It is as if the mind, upon hearing God's voice, pauses to listen, allowing us to rest in the knowing that all is as it should be. It is not a clarity born of the intellect, but one that bypasses the mind altogether, settling into our hearts and souls as a knowing beyond words. Clarity from God's voice does not stir up confusion, nor does it leave room for doubt. Instead, it establishes an inner order, a quiet assurance that everything, even in its complexity, fits together in ways that transcend our limited understanding. This clarity often emerges in moments of stillness, when we are open, receptive, and free from the constraints of self-interest and mental noise. It is not something we have to chase, nor is it something that can be manipulated by our will. It simply is, like a deep breath of fresh air that fills the lungs and clears the mind. Peace is the subtle undercurrent beneath all that is truly important. In the world of constant noise and distraction, peace is often elusive, a fleeting sensation we grasp for but struggle to hold. The mind, with its constant chatter, is rarely at rest, always calculating, planning, and reacting. Our thoughts are a reflection of the chaotic nature of our lives. Disjointed, filled with anxieties and hopes, fears and desires, they stir up inner conflict, causing us to question our decisions, our direction, and our worth. The peace we yearn for seems distant, clouded by the endless storm of thoughts and emotions that arise within us. God's voice, however, is inherently peaceful. It does not disrupt the stillness, but rather brings us into it. When we listen deeply, the voice of the divine carries with it an unmistakable sense of calm, a tranquility that does not come from external circumstances, but from within. It is not a peace that is dependent on things going well, on everything falling into place. Rather, it is a peace that transcends all circumstances. It arises when we stop trying to control, to fix, or to manipulate the world around us, and simply allow ourselves to rest in the moment, fully present, free from the pull of our worries. This peace that comes with God's voice does not demand anything from us. It asks nothing but our willingness to be open, to surrender the grasping of the mind, and to trust. It brings a quiet resolution, a deep knowing that despite the noise and chaos of the world, there is something within us that remains undisturbed, something that cannot be shaken. This peace permeates our being in such a way that it alters the way we interact with the world. We no longer react impulsively or defensively. Instead, we respond with clarity, with balance, and with a sense of calm assurance. The peace that accompanies God's voice is like a sanctuary amidst the noise. It is not a fleeting sense of quiet that is soon disturbed by the next thought or feeling. It is a lasting stillness that remains even when the world around us is in motion. It gently holds us in the present, grounding us in the now, reminding us that true peace is not something to be sought outside of ourselves, but something we carry within, waiting to be recognized. At the core of our human experience lies a constant tug-of-war between self-centered desires and a deeper call to transcend the ego. Our thoughts are often colored by this self-interest. We think in terms of I and mine, of what benefits us, what serves our needs, and what satisfies our cravings. Even the most seemingly altruistic thoughts can be filtered through the lens of self-interest, influenced by our need for approval, recognition, or validation. The inner world of the mind is shaped by this fundamental urge to preserve, protect, and prioritize the self. This self-centeredness can create walls, both within and around us, leading to feelings of isolation, insecurity, and frustration. God's voice, however, speaks from a place of radical selflessness. It is not concerned with the individual in isolation, but with the interconnectedness of all. It calls us not to serve the self, but to serve the greater good, to step beyond the narrow confines of me and mine, and recognize our place within the larger tapestry of life. The voice of the divine calls us to see others not as competitors or obstacles, but as fellow travelers, each deserving of love, compassion, and care. And there is no agenda in God's voice except for the well-being of all. A deep and abiding concern for the flourishing of life in all its forms, though this selflessness is not something that can be manufactured by the will. It does not arise from a sense of duty or obligation, nor is it a strategy for gaining favor or approval. True selflessness is a natural outgrowth of listening to the voice of God. It arises when we let go of the need to control, to possess, or to define our worth by our accomplishments or possessions. God's voice invites us into a way of being that transcends individual gain, leading us to act not out of a sense of what can I get, but rather from a place of what can I give. This is the essence of true selflessness, not self-neglect, but self-transcendence. A recognition that our deepest fulfillment comes not from grasping for ourselves, but from offering ourselves freely and generously to others. This is the essence of greater graciousness, and recognition that our deepest fulfillment comes not from grasping for ourselves, but from offering ourselves freely and generously to others. In the presence of this selflessness, the ego begins to lose its grip. We no longer feel threatened by others' successes, nor do we feel the need to elevate ourselves above them. Instead, we experience a deep sense of connection and knowing that we are all part of a greater whole. This selflessness, born from God's voice, is not a rejection of the self, but a transformation of it, a moving from the small, isolated I to the expansive we, where love, compassion, and empathy flow freely without boundaries. And so this purpose is the thread that weaves through the fabric of our existence, guiding us through the complexities and uncertainties of life. Our thoughts often push us toward purpose, but they do so with mixed motives: desire for success, fear of failure, a longing for approval, or a search for meaning that feels externally driven. We think in terms of what we should achieve, what goals we must reach, and what external markers will validate our worth. This kind of purpose is often shaped by the pressures of the world around us, the expectations placed on us by society, culture, and even our own inner drive to measure up. God's voice, however, calls us to a deeper, more authentic purpose, a purpose that is not defined by worldly standards, but by an alignment with the divine. It is a calling that transcends personal achievement or material success. It is not about what we can accumulate, but about who we are becoming and how we are contributing to the greater good. When we listen to God's voice, we are invited to discover a purpose that resonates with our deepest being, one that is rooted not in external circumstances, but in the truth of who we are at the soul level. This calling is not loud or forceful. nor does it come with a clear, linear path. It does not demand immediate results or external validation. Rather, it whispers gently, inviting us to step into a life that aligns with our highest values, with love, integrity, and compassion. The voice of God does not push us towards specific career paths or societal achievements. Instead, it encourages us to live authentically, to act in ways that reflect the highest expression of our nature. Our purpose, in this context, becomes a manifestation of our true essence, not shaped by what we think we should do, but by what we are being called to become. So, this divine calling often leads us to acts of service, to ways of being that extend beyond the self and into the world. It is a purpose that is concerned with the well-being of others, with creating harmony, healing, and peace. It transcends ambition in the traditional sense, urging us to be present, to love deeply, and to contribute to the world in ways that honor our highest calling. It speaks to the unique gifts we carry within us. When we heed this calling, we are no longer driven by the fear of failure or the need for external validation. Our sense of purpose becomes rooted in the intrinsic joy of living in alignment with our true nature, with the divine will, and with a greater sense of service to humanity. The voice of God calls us to a life of meaning that is not measured by accomplishments, but by the depth of our connections, the sincerity of our intentions, and the love we share. It invites us to discover purpose in every moment, in every relationship, in every act of kindness and compassion. Truth, in its purest form, is not a construct of the mind, but an inherent aspect of existence. Our thoughts, however, are often shaped by perceptions, interpretations, and biases. They are colored by personal experiences, fears, desires, and the influence of the world around us. We think in terms of what we believe to be true, based on what we have learned, what we have been told, and what we have seen. But this kind of truth is often partial, fragmented, and ever-changing. It can be clouded by self-interest, by the desire to protect the ego or to maintain a certain image. We often confuse our own limited understanding with universal truth, holding tightly to ideas that serve our comfort rather than our growth. God's voice, however, speaks from the place of ultimate truth, a truth that is not dependent on the limitations of the mind, nor on the fluctuations of personal experience. This divine truth is timeless, unchanging, and all-encompassing. It does not bend to our personal desires or to the constructs of society. When God speaks, it calls us into alignment with something greater than ourselves, something that transcends individual perspective and speaks to the heart of all being. It is a truth that resonates with the deepest part of us, not as a set of intellectual conclusions, but as a direct knowing that bypasses the mind and settles in the soul. And this alignment with truth is not about intellectual understanding or the accumulation of facts. It is about recognizing and surrendering to a deeper reality, one that exists beyond the confines of our thoughts and perceptions. God's voice does not seek to explain everything, but rather to bring us into a state of alignment with the truth that underlies all of existence. This truth is not separate from us, it is inherent within us, waiting to be discovered when we quiet the mind and listen deeply. It is a truth that connects us to the essence of life itself, to the divine source from which all things flow. The voice of God speaks this truth not as an imposition, but as an invitation to see clearly, to perceive the world and ourselves without the distortion of ego or fear. It calls us to let go of falsehoods, both those we hold about ourselves and those we accept from the world, and to embrace a more expansive understanding of reality. In this alignment with truth, we experience a profound sense of clarity and peace as we begin to see things as they truly are, free from the layers of conditioning that have clouded our perception. The truth that God's voice reveals is not something we must seek outside of ourselves, but something that we must remember, something that we must recognize is already present within us. This alignment calls us to live authentically, to act in accordance with this deeper truth, and to let go of the false narratives we have constructed. It does not require us to conform to the expectations of others or to fit into predefined roles. Rather, it encourages us to live in harmony with our inner nature, with the divine essence that resides within us. It is a truth that, when fully embraced, leads to freedom. Freedom from the constraints of false beliefs, freedom from the tyranny of the ego, and freedom to live in alignment with the highest good for all. Surrender is often misunderstood in the context of power or weakness. We tend to think of surrender as giving up, losing control, or admitting defeat. In the world of our thoughts, surrender can feel like an uncomfortable relinquishment of agency, as if we are being asked to abdicate responsibility or give in to forces beyond our control. Our minds, with their constant need to plan, analyze, and direct, resist the notion of surrender. We are conditioned to believe that we must always be in charge, that we must fight for what we want, and that our success depends on our ability to dominate the world around us. God's voice, however, calls us to a different kind of surrender, not one of weakness, but one of trust. It is an invitation to let go of our attachment to outcomes, to release the illusion of control, and to allow life to unfold in alignment with a deeper divine purpose. This surrender is not about passivity or resignation, but about an active, conscious choice to yield to the flow of life, trusting that there is a wisdom far greater than our own. It is the recognition that despite our best efforts, there are forces in the universe beyond our understanding, that guide, shape, and direct our lives in ways that we cannot always see or predict. The invitation to surrender is not an abdication of responsibility. Rather, it is an invitation to release the unnecessary burden of trying to control everything. Our thoughts often convince us that we must force things into being, that we must push and strive to make our desires manifest. But God's voice calls us to trust that what is meant for us will come to us in its own time and way. As long as we remain open, receptive, and aligned with the divine will, this kind of surrender is not passive resignation, but an active cooperation with the natural flow of life. A letting go of rigid expectations and the need to control every moment. In surrender, we begin to understand that our attempts to control the world around us are often rooted in fear and insecurity. The fear of the unknown, the fear of failure, and the fear of losing what we have built all contribute to our resistance to surrender. But God's voice invites us to release this fear, to step into the unknown with faith and courage, trusting that we are always held, always guided, and always supported by a higher power. This surrender is a letting go of the ego's constant striving, a softening of the heart that allows us to rest in the present moment, knowing that everything is unfolding as it should. True surrender does not mean abandoning ourselves or giving up on our dreams and desires. Rather, it is the understanding that there is a greater intelligence guiding the process of life, and that sometimes the best way to move forward is not by force, but by allowing. When we surrender, we cease to struggle against the current of life, and instead, we begin to flow with it. And then we begin to flow with it. We become more attuned to the rhythm of the universe, more aware of the subtle signs and signals that point us in the right direction. The invitation to surrender is not about giving up our power, but about trusting in a power greater than ourselves, one that knows what is best for us, even when we cannot see the full picture. In embracing these invitations, the difference between our thoughts and the voice of God becomes clear not through intellectual reasoning, but through the quiet surrender of the mind. When we stop fighting the flow of life, when we allow ourselves to listen, we find that the voice we seek has always been there, waiting to guide us. It does not push or force, it simply speaks with love, urging us toward our highest good. And so, as we move forward from this moment, let us carry with us the wisdom of these distinctions. Let us learn to listen, not to the constant noise of our thoughts, but to the still, subtle voice that calls us to something greater. In that listening, we may find the peace, purpose, and clarity that we have been seeking all along. Let us embrace the divine invitation to surrender and trust knowing that in doing so, we step into a life of deeper meaning and fulfillment, aligned with the truth that exists within us all.